Welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine. I'm the president, and I will be your host today. Let's turn to our speaker today, and that is Dustin Williams. Dustin is a lifelong native Tucsonan, and he graduated from Amphitheater High School in 1992, and he also graduated from the University of Arizona. Dustin was elected the Pima County Schools Superintendent in 2016 and reelected in 2020. Arizona schools at the moment are under attack by right-wing radicals. Republican State Senator Michelle Ugenti-Rita even called school officials and teachers educational terrorists. And they've introduced bills to limit transgender students, to penalize school employees who don't out students who are gay to the parents. So they want to ban sex education. They want to let parents review every book in the library, and they want to stop any education that casts blame on race or ethnicity. And obviously, they're trying to smoke out what they call critical race theory. So in light of all of this, I want to introduce you, Dustin. Tell us what you know. The floor is yours.
Okay, Larry DGT, glad to be with everyone. You guys have had some wonderful people, so honored to be here. Larry asked me to touch bases on some of these bills, and between January and March, April, you're going to have about 1,500 to 1,700 bills flow through Arizona. And so the big picture from what we see happening and from my expertise of what I observe is you do have a full-on assault in some big areas happening at the state legislature. You've got it in the forms of education and really, suppressing students, penalization of teachers, big fear tactics. And then you topple that with election bills that have been just incredibly challenging. And I'm on multiple boards, and I sit on a lot of boards. One board I'm actually on is called the Arizona Association of Counties. So it's a lobbyist for all of the row offices. It's called AACO, AACO. I sit on that board as vice president effectively on April Fools, no pun intended, on April 1. I sit on the board currently as a representative of the elected county school superintendents, our association, which is the AACSS, the Arizona Association of County School Superintendents. We meet weekly, and most times in the very beginning 3 months, AACO, we meet twice a week. And we just review all of the bills. And this is just a portion of the Arizona Association bills that come through that we work with. AACO will look at all of the other bills that come to the table. So a lot of these will be geared around education, but AACO, we look at the whole gambit of what's coming through. And so you're seeing two huge shifts really starting to take play. One is, let's go with education. The first shift in that is the privatization of vouchers. Vouchers were started to enter the arena somewhere around 2017 in Arizona. In other states, you saw this format, and that's kind of been copied and played forward. Even against the will of the voter that voted against full-on vouchers across the state, you're seeing that the majority here in Arizona of the state legislature, which is 90 people, you have 30 senators and you have 60 House of Representatives and one governor. That body in itself controls the entire state. There is nowhere way around it. And you'll see that these party line votes, whether it's 16-14 or 31-29, those have been dictating 100% of everything that is egregious, is dismantling education happening. And it's a party line vote. And so these are some of the areas that I've been, met with Ms. Tehran who's the president of the Democratic Party, the state Democratic Party. And we really were focusing on some strategy sessions early in January. And she was, she said, Dustin, we want to be here. We want to provide cover and help. And I said, we don't need cover, but we need help, and we need a house, or we need a chamber. I was like, we can't continue to maintain some of the areas of education without getting one of these chambers, because what's happening is they are having literally free will to pass some of the craziest things that I never even thought we've seen. They very simply have just piecemealed vouchers all the way around. So it started with going to special education and Native American reservations and students in select areas. And that just keeps getting expanded and expanded. Then it went across state lines. So we're even paying for private vouchers that go across Arizona boundary. If that makes any sense, our actual dollars are going across those lines. That was as of, I believe, 2 years ago. And now you're just seeing a full-on assault, which was a loophole, basically expanding vouchers so that every student, pretty much no matter what, you can get into gray areas, will get $7,000. So we have 3 pots of money now that our education dollars are going to. We have one, which is district school, which it was intended to do. Next came charters in the late 90s, and that's been expanded fully all the way through. And now you're seeing the very, very beginning of what charters were in the 90s with private schools. And now they have attached not just the private school voucher going to private schools, but now private schools can collaborate with their funding and their model with the student tuition organizations, the STOs. So corporations can get involved. Even down to transportation. And there's a common language, which is, this is for the kid that's failing, or this is for the choice of the student or the parent. And that's the common defense that is always given for this type of idea. But in turn, what's funny is you're now seeing kind of district and charter on one side and private on the other. And you're getting a different type of kind of pushback. Problem with the voucher system that we're seeing, because all dollars follow children now. So that if you're, and it's current year funding, so they get funded like today. So if that student was in that chair today and then leaves, that dollar leaves that day. One of the big issues is what's happening at some of the private schools that we can't engage in, and why is there such a double standard as far as accountability and transparency in those schools, and then none at the other. And they'll use tactics that, students take ACTs and SATs, and that's the testing measure. But that doesn't matter, because the district school and the charter school still have to take a federally mandated test that, if you've never seen this thing, it is extremely difficult. It, in my opinion, does not represent the students of color, or does it represent what their environment and what they're used to or look like? And it's not good. I don't think it's good for the student at the end of the day. I fully agree in testing students. I'm all for assessments, but I definitely am not for a one-size federal mandated test. And that's supposed to give you a snapshot of what the student looks like. I don't think that's healthy for the student, the family, or the school. I think there's so many other parameters, and we have seen a little menu open up in the high school area as far as entering a point system, where if the student's involved in career and technical education, then they get a point. If they're involved in an honors class, they might get another point. Some attendance stuff is in there, but then ultimately those federal tests come in. At the elementary level, we're still there. The privatization voucher system has none of that involved. So you have this big double standard of, where that student's going to go and what's in the best interest of that student. And then you'll hear a lot of, well, the student, the choice works because you could take the student out of a failing area and move them there. And that's another problem, is you start to label areas failing. And I don't think that's positive for our communities. And the other part is this number of $7,000 when we know tuitions for certain schools are well above that. And we know that ultimately families in low socioeconomic standards, or the amount of money they make, even if you gave them the $7,000, they still can't afford the the $12,000 ticket or $10,000. So who's really benefiting from that big $7,000, voucher coming through on that? And those are the big things that we see the paradigm shift happening. And unfortunately, that's going to continue in a major progressive way, especially with the dollars that are flowing towards it and now bringing in STO. So a change at that legislature for any type of bill like that. The other part is the tactics of fear. What can you teach and what can you not teach, and what will you do to the teacher, and how much will you penalize the teacher, or can a parent file suit against a teacher? And we were kind of having an early discussion when we came early on this morning, and I'll just kind of reiterate it. Fear is a nasty animal. For certain people on this call and in our community, fear might ignite you and you might be able to push back. And I really want to emphasize the word might. That's not for everybody. A lot of people don't like that confrontation. They don't feel comfortable having those discussions. They may feel intimidated, and parents can be, and the system can be very intimidating, especially with kind of where our political fever has gotten. So what you might have happen, or you will have happen, is even if the bill comes out and it would maybe make people say, hey, we're going to fight against that and we're going to stand up, you might just have a whole nother percentage of people that are just not really going to go that direction. And they might not get too much into the language or the verbiage of the content. And that's the scariest part of these fear factor bills of what you're going to do with teachers, down to gender and race and curriculum and policy, is an inviting classroom and a positive classroom, hands down, is an area where students are allowed and are taught to take risks. And that means that they can ask questions and feel safe and make mistakes. If you have your leader of that classroom, that champion that classroom, being scrutinized or penalized or potentially sued, we have major, major issues, which means also students not learning what's the most important thing for them to learn about, how to grow about themselves. And everyone here, I think we all agree that the brain physically is not fully developed until you're about 24, 26 years old. Science has figured this part out. Matter of fact, the second half of your brain development after about 11 could be some of the most vulnerable years they're finding out. So there's some big, big things on the horizon when it comes to that. All of these things that I'm talking about, and I'm not going to go into detail on these parts, this is happening on the election forefront. So the elections are your county recorder's office and elections offices. All of these are probably quadrupled and put on these election bills that are just suppressing people and making it more and more cumbersome and difficult to vote. And so we're now also going to start attacking people's voice at the voter polls. And those are the two forefronts that I see as battle areas for where our advocacy most importantly needs to have that attention. And then how do we attack it? And that's the big question. And yes, calling your senator works. And yes, emails to your senator work or help. Request to speak helps. Being in the know, it all helps. Nothing doesn't work, but the ultimate fix at the end of the day is the balance of power. And if we continue in this state to have this unequal balance, I tell everyone, thank God I live in Pima County. I walk around with 50,000 people ahead on the voter poll list that agree with kind of what I'm talking about. Maybe not everything, but at least we're in the same bucket of let's help these kids and let's bring more dollars in and do good things. Unfortunately, that's not what the counties look like across the state. And they are far and few between. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. So I always say, boy, we have our most amazing PCs. It's like, I told Ms. Tehran, I said, maybe we need to send some of those over to like LD26 or LD22 or wherever it is and kind of talk to the different voter. And we kind of were just strategizing on how do we do that? Because the lingo that we use sometimes here is not going to work as far as if you're saying, vouchers, don't work for all students, especially minorities of color and special education ultimately at the end of the day. That doesn't work. But what might work is understanding that the money trail, your tax dollars going across county line and so forth. So those are big things to kind of think about as far as that strategy piece. I leave that a lot to the leaders in my industry, which are you, and different, LD9s and 10s. And again, in Pima County, we're fortunate because there are a lot of us that think the same way, but we really have to be careful on, how do we support some of these other LDs across out of Pima County to see if we can't capture maybe a seat or two and get that party line vote split. Because boy, if we own the House chamber or we own the Senate chamber, and we had, even if one was Republican and one was Democrat, you could really get a fine balance at least coming in, because you get to strategize. I see some hands and I'm going to do some questions right over, but I just wanted to give a couple updates on kind of what we saw. Larry sent me a couple things, and this is what we can do. I was kind of thinking about how to strategize with all of you going forward. And Larry, I could just send these to you and you could send this to your group so that when you guys have questions on certain bills, like for instance, Larry, do you have this sheet that you sent out, which has the bills? Like if we look at Senate Bill 1138.
Yes.
Can you put this up? There's only 4 here that I want to review, but I want to use these as kind of a, maybe this is something that we could do going forward. So Larry, if you put that up right here, it's really important that any bill that comes across always have a bill number attached to it. So Senate Bill 1138, and what I do when we get these bills is I work with very close lobbyists and insiders to find out where the bill is. Is the bill moving? Does it have legs? Does it have momentum? Sometimes it's a full green light. It's done. It's going to pass. They have the votes. They're set in their ways. They're going to pass that thing. It's going to happen. So I just kind of did a little bit for you last week, Larry, on these, which is Senate Bill 1138. It's a perfect example. Passing, moving, all party line. Looks like it's hitting rules or the floor. And there you can all see it. It's limiting the transgender student from expressing their gender identity. This is just another assault of what we talked about, of big picture ideas that is just, suppressing students and how they feel comfortable in themselves. This bill, unfortunately, this has the legs. More than likely, you'll see this pass. So this might be something we want to put more energy in and advocating as far as how can you get to maybe the 6 or that majority who has connections with that group. Will they come out of party line? Yes. Is it often? No. So if we went to the next one, Larry, right there, yep, 2161. This one I have notes of, it's having a little bit of issues. It was retained. It was held. It's being held. So this one right here is being held 2161. And this one needs to continue to be held. So this is held in Senate Education Committee, but it looks that it could go possibly as early as this Wednesday. This is one that we have some momentum. We could get this held. I believe Boyer is holding this up. Senator Boyer Sometimes holds things up for whatever reason. He seems to be there's certain Republicans that you can work with better, and you've really got to strategize on working with them. And it's hard to do that because you want to really to find balance, because you want them to pass some of the bills that we need to get passed as well, but we can't get them usually passed with a Democrat sponsoring. So we have to work with certain Republicans. So it gets really political in some of these areas. Senate Bill 2161 looks like at this moment it's being held and hopefully maintains being held. If we go to the next, 2285. Go down a little bit more, Larry.
Like so.
Yeah, there we go. 2285. This is dead. This died. This has no legs, and it's not going to move. So that's positive. This was a big one. Not having education about AIDS. Some of these bills, it's almost just, it's just mind-boggling, some of the stuff that's coming out. And you're just seeing some of the stuff that is, I haven't been elected long, like Larry mentioned, in 2016. And by the way, I'm humbled and honored to be elected for this community. I'm by no means an expert, but I do spend a lot of time up at the legislature, and I've never seen anything like this last year. This current year has just been, I don't know if I've talked to other people. They said they've never even seen anything like this. So that's good that that's being held. Next one, which is 2439, and also being held. It may make the floor next week. These are the type of things, though, Larry, that I can work with DGT or any political committee to kind of get background for you on where it might be, so that efforts can be focused in the right areas. If we know that there's one that is kind of on that fence, that's when we really got to try to figure out and strategize, how do you get to that Republican majority part there? They're going to jump in there, because you're going to have the Democrats each time with our backs as far as protecting kids in education and elections. I mean, you're going to do it every time. And so it's that strategy part. That's just kind of an idea of what's happening. And then I think you had Udall's on here, critical race theory. That's for surely going to pass. She's going to use that, and they're going to use that critical race theory as just a complete bully pulpit and put candidates and people in traps. And so if you come out against critical race theory, which in the bill it states you can't teach racism or make people feel guilty or all the language that's in there. Well, of course, we're not teaching that. We've never taught that. I mean, that's, for an educator, it's insulting that that bill is even on there, because we pride ourselves with dignity and integrity and teaching students all about, as much as we can, and let him have complete autonomy of questions. And so to suppress them or to even have an accusation to say that is being taught, that to me is a narrative that is not positive. Two more things. Obviously, 208 did not pass. 208 was an initiative that got kind of shut down, quite honestly, by the insiders of Governor Ducey's political powers, which would have given us approximately $800 million or $1 billion based on taxing people that make over $250,000 net or $500,000 net if you're a couple, and you would have got charged 3.5%. And that would have generated consistently somewhere around 800, some projected $1 billion, but the projections on that, regardless, it was good money, and it's having a lot of trouble. I think there is a way to appeal it, and hopefully we'll see appeal on that. And the last big one is, please write this down, these letters. It's called AEL. It's called the aggregate expenditure limit. That's about $1 billion. That was almost not going to go through. That's a $150 million cut just to Pima County. TUSD, as you all know that district very well, that would have been about $50 million for their district. That got passed, and I don't want to say passed. It passed with a 2/3 vote. did not pass all the way through. There were certain legislators that absolutely voted against letting schools go past their authority, which they always have and always will, because there's initiatives that give them more money than their base amount. So if we have a 1 cent sales tax and you have a base amount, you're going to go over your budget with that sales tax dollars. This is just one example. They spend all that money in teacher salaries, parapros, great stuff, programs, personnel for schools. That is not done. That is a major, major concern still. We are actually meeting as we speak in committee on that here to figure out. That comes back next year, next March 1st, right back. So until we have a voter approved initiative to figure out the AEL, we have some big hurdles coming, because it was hard getting it passed. Next legislative session is going to look different. And if it's worse in the form of players that have power that don't believe in public ed, that ultimately will not pass. And next year you'll see approximately, probably not quite the 17, or I think it was technically 16 or maybe even 15.9 or whatever % budget cut across the state. It'd probably be closer to that 8-10%, but still it's going to be roughly 75 million just for Pima County. I spoke a lot. I see some great hands up. Larry, I'll let you go ahead and pick the hands up, and I'll answer the best I can.
All right, let's turn first to Craig Markin. Unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, Craig.
Okay, hello. How does your budget or distribution of monies affect homeschooling?
That's a great question. Homeschooling gets absolutely $0. Homeschool does, however, qualify for the vouchers, which are for private schools. And that would be directly with the Arizona Department of Education and the homeschool parent. Our office, the only authority is a law here that if you are going to homeschool your child, you have to come to our office and file what's called a homeschool affidavit. Once you fill that out, that's all there is with homeschool. Now techniques and strategies that parents use at homeschool their kids, that's also left to them. And some of them just speaking for them. Some of them do a fantastic job. Others, it's challenging. So we work with them directly as far as things that they might need. But as far as funding goes, no funding comes through this office for homeschool students.
Thank you.
All right.
Great question.
Lucy Messing, go right ahead with your question, Lucy.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, Dustin. How
are
you? Hi,
Lucy. I see you.
Well, you see my picture. I'm multitasking, so I'm not going to put on my video. But here's my question. And I've been trying to look up the number about a bill that's been introduced that Ducey is pushing to have schools that get a D- or D or an F rating for 2 years in a row to be taken over by private organizations or out-of-state organizations. And I don't know if you've heard of it or if you have the status. I've been in Vegas at a conference, and so I haven't seen what's occurring right now. Any information? Yep.
That's Ducey's idea. A lot of these ideas Ducey comes up with his think tanks or whatever you want to call those things. That's being ran by Michelle Udall. I wish I had the number off. And that you said it correctly. That's basically what it is. If schools are failing, you can have an out-of-state company come and take over the actual school. The logistics of where that is still in discussions, and I'll have to get you that number.
I see that Michael put the number on there, 2808. So thank you for that.
What I can do is I can contact our ACO and our lobbyist representatives. I can find out where the legs are on that. Larry, that's a perfect example. If you sent me the number and just said, hey, Dustin, just like a quick overview, and then you could send it to your group. So if you send me that, I can find out where that is standing and if it's making it to the floor and if it's making it to different chambers. But in a sense, you're right, Lucy. Out-of-state companies basically coming over and taking over shop.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. And hey, it was great seeing you up at the Capitol the other week.
That was really fun. I really liked it. Thank you. And I'll get with an update for you on this bill.
Okay, we have a question from Steve Linder, our treasurer. Go right ahead, Steve.
Hi, Dustin, and thank you for all you do. There was a bill proposed, and this would directly kind of affect you when you had to make an appointment. There was a bill proposed that would require, school board elections have always been nonpartisan completely, but there was a bill proposed in which school board candidates were going to be required to run as a partisan with their party affiliation. Now, I don't know what status that bill is, if it's dead. I mean, nothing's really dead till they adjourn, but do you know where that bill is, and have you had a chance to lobby on that or anything? And just tell us what the status is about.
Sure. Great question. Yep. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think it was Ugenti Rita that was sponsoring that bill. That at this moment has died. That was a really good example of sitting on, I mentioned I'm on the board of Arizona Association of Counties. We caught wind of that real early. And because of that one that came real early, and sometimes that's better than what Steve says, they can come late. They can come in the form of strikers. And as you saw last year's budget, they put these things in what's called the burbs, which are the budget bills at the end. They can slip stuff in. So nothing truly ever is done until there's sign die, which is, hopefully usually in May or earlier. But at this moment, that is off, and we were highly opposed to that.
Okay. Let's turn to Barbara Warren. She has a question, and then we'll get to you, Mike. Go ahead, Barbara Warren.
Hi, this may be outdated, or you may have answered it, and I didn't recognize the bill number, but I just got an email that came up that said Supreme Court strikes down Invest in Education Act. Is that new news or is that old news?
Yeah, it's new news.
So, if it's new news, what are the implications?
Yeah, so it's new news, and the fact that we were waiting for the judgment of the judge, and that came out just last Friday, and that was what was called Proposition 208. So that was the tax on
that you just mentioned,
right? And that's what that was. Again, what's interesting is the state in Arizona constantly has to invent these initiatives to try to fund our kids. We're always last in funding. Whether you want to argue 47, 48, 49, 50, I don't. That's last to me. I don't like being in the bottom bracket. So thankful we do have some major champions that put together some great ideas, but that goes back to, don't forget, Barbara, these powers that they have, that ultimately is what has happened to 208, in my opinion. I don't think there was anything written with it. And the intentions of how the voters voted for it and voted it in should tell you that the voters didn't have a problem with it either. There could be an appeal on that. I don't know the answer as to whether they have filed an appeal or not yet. Something to definitely put on the agenda, though, Larry. Keep up, and you can always give me a quick, where are we on that one? And also Lucy and her education committee. I don't know if anybody sits on that. On this group, I highly recommend getting involved with Lucy Messing. She has an education committee and has a lot of the good updates on there as well.
Okay, Mike Bryan has been monitoring questions in the chat. Mike, go right ahead.
I actually haven't seen any questions in the chat. Everybody's been asking their own questions, which is great. I do have a question. I was wondering if you could give us something of an overview of how STOs and now these vouchers are impacting or squeezing our public school budgets. What's the fiscal impact there? Can you give us a scale of the numbers?
Yeah, so you'd have to look at individual districts, but last year or the year before, I have to kind of get it all I got to get everything back in line because this COVID, which we haven't spoken about a little bit, has talk about a major disruption. TUSD loses approximately about $2 million a year, probably a little bit more after this last COVID year. I would venture to say approximately maybe 2.5 million. Anytime a student leaves, remember that dollar follows that student. And so those dollars just get taken away from that district. The other part is in the STO arena, major money flows through that for students to go to private schools. And corporations can get involved, and they do. And the reason and I have spoken to corporations, it's a great question, Mike. One of them is district schools can't take corporate money. It's just not allowed as part of that whole, the checks and balances. But STOs can take corporate money. Private schools can take corporate dollars. So you'll see some organizations donating $50,000 right into STOs that give scholarships for kids to go to private school. And we're going to stick hard to our two words on that. It's accountability and transparency of what's going on, and really being transparent, not just necessarily what's going on in school, but what's the socioeconomic difference? What's the difference in color, difference in special education? That's the transparency piece that we want to know. If you're just kind of taking or skimming off the top a certain demographic of students that can pass your entrance exam, and that's what you're using for your STO money, that's not fair. Because then the districts are stuck with students that are 2 years behind or in low socioeconomic areas. They need more resources. So these STOs provide a major imbalance to the system of equity. That's the biggest thing to know about that. And then ultimately, you're looking at millions of dollars that are getting depleted for the public education system.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is maybe a concern that these STOs are sort of a backdoor way of unintegrating our schools and making them less racially diverse than they might otherwise be.
That's a perfect analogy to look at it, and the argument is the other way. So you're seeing two arguments come together on: are we looking at modern day segregation again? Is that really what's happening? And if you follow the dollar and you see the statistics of demographics, it's really plain and simple. You absolutely have a major imbalance in the form of color, 100%. You can see it anywhere you go.
I have a follow-up on the vouchers. How is that $7,000 voucher number arrived at? Why is it $7,000? And second, are there actually any private schools that somebody could take just this voucher to and actually pay the tuition with that $7,000?
That's a great question. Number one, a lot of these numbers that you'll see are randomly chosen. What is the rhyme, reason, or methodology behind it? It's unknown. I had a really good conversation with a pretty strong Republican, but totally believes in education. It's an oxymoron, but they're there. They really are there. And you're seeing there is this new demographic of Republicans that are kind of not liking the direction that some of this pathways is happening. And I think those are who we want to strategize with. But what happens is you have two formulas, Michael. One formula is you have a base amount of money that goes to a student. And then the other formula is you have the whole picture of the add-ons. And those add-ons can be anywhere from bonds and overrides that districts have gotten. There could be different special education dollars that go to that student. But typically you're going to see that base amount level is somewhere around $6,000 for district schools. And in charter schools, that number is closer to $7,000. So is that number $7,000? Is that to steer people out of schools and put them in private schools with no add-on money after the $7,000? So in a district school or even a charter school, you might get your base amount, your $6,000 or your $7,000, but you'll have add-ons after. It could come in the form of bonds, overrides, or special education services. Am I there? Oh, good. Okay. And so you'll have a little bit more money on that district number. So that student might actually be $9,500. Well, if I take students right out of that and give them a set figure of $7,000, then at the general fund where all of this comes from, at the end of the day, I don't have to pay more than $7,000. So is that the strategy for actually why you're really creating your educational dollar, knowing that the parent can fork over that rest of that bill through their own transportation, food, housing, clothing, tutoring, all of that additional part? That is one idea. But as far as why is that picked, that's the same reason as why is charter assistance funding. So every charter school gets charter assistance, which is $1,700, just chosen. That's just chosen. And that's what they get. So it's a great question. And it's something to kind of think as what is that true strategy for what is that 7,000 mark?
Dustin, we appreciate your passion and commitment, and we have time for one more question. And let's go to Susie Anderson. Thanks. Go ahead, Susie.
Thanks, Dustin. Hey, I was wondering if your board members, your school board members, what happens if they disagree with the laws? Like, can they support the teachers somehow to give them, on this, don't tell your teacher anything, or teachers have to expose the student to their, out them to their family? Will they have any power to be able to help their staff members?
Yeah, you're going to have a level of autonomy. Can they flat out just disobey a law? No, it's not recommended by any means, especially with how these things are crafted of getting the attorney general involved and so forth. But are you going to have a particular governing body of a school district that is trying to say, I got ya? That is the fear of some of the constituents that we work with, is when we're looking at governing board members, the power of a governing board of a district school, it's incredible. And if that district wanted to, they could dictate how it would be if they wanted to really kind of flame out that policy. You saw a lot in the form of mask mandates and so forth. Certain boards, not just, Pima County, again, is a little different animal here, because a lot of people think along the same way. And a lot of voters can kind of read through the lines and vote for their elected governing board members. But, how far that policy and how stringent that policy is going to be implemented all comes down to those governing board members. For us, I'll use, our authority at our accommodation district, we've expressly told our teachers, you will not change the way you teach. You feel free to teach, and we will have your back at the end of the day, because we know what you're doing, because we can speak on behalf of the teachers because we've hired them all. And, we know they're doing great stuff. So that's our attitude in as far as these bills that come through, which is, okay, you're going to do that. Well, at the end of the day, we're going to be protecting our teachers to have full autonomy and be the professional that the profession should have, which is allowing these teachers to do what they do best, which is teach and be left alone. Not left alone as far as, not supporting them, but you know what I mean, as far as dictating what they're teaching. That's no other profession in any profession comes and tells the people what they should be doing. You trust your employees, and you work with them, and you coach them. And that's what we'll continue. So that's the stance we have. And that's what you'll see on other elected bodies.
All right, Dustin, we've run out of time, and we're so lucky to have you as our Pima School Superintendent.
Appreciate that.
Could you wrap up our meeting and tell us how we can find out what you're doing, how we can support you, and how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so number one, Larry has my email, dustin.williams@pima.gov. He also has my personal assistant, who is phenomenal, Jeanette Velasquez. My first thing is I invite you to come to the office. Lucy comes and pokes around sometimes when she's down here, it's something you really got to see. It's a neat place. It's your office. You're a voting member and you own it. So just come down and see what we do here. Second thing is, I don't have to just come once a year and speak. If you want to utilize some of these services or some of these boards I'm on, please reach out and I can go try to find an answer. You use me as much as you like. And Larry, if you just say, hey, Dustin, track bill number 445 and just give me a quick little report, I'd be more than happy to do what I can do. I can get you an answer. I can go look for that answer. The other thing is understanding these propositions and these initiatives, they get confusing. They get really, really confusing as far as when they pass, when they don't. Aggregated expenditure limit, all those stuff. Write those questions down. I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you ever just need a one-on-one question, dustin.williams@pima.gov. Just shoot me an email. Write me your question, give me your cell phone. I'll call you up. We can kind of have a dialogue. I can, whatever way I can help is really what I want to do. This is my passion. I'm running again in 2024. I'm not looking to go be a senator. That's not my forte. My forte is working in what I love, which is education. And so I want to stick around here for a long time. And I want to just be that person where you can use me as a partner and someone to come help with questions, because believe me, I have just as many questions as you will have every day. I scratch my brain. I said, I have to have my finance staff with me all the time to kind of figure out where we are. So,
and I believe you can follow you on Twitter, right? @teacher.
Yep, Super Teacher on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. That's Pima Schools, Pima School SUP. Like us, share it with your friends. The more you're on them with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that, the more you're in the know, and you'll just see where we're out and about. And if that sparks a question, or if you're reading something in the paper or you saw something on the news and you just are like, what is that? How does that affect Pima? Give me a quick shout. I'll be more than happy to call you up or have you over here for coffee, anything you'd like. So just to give a kind of a recap of what our office does for some of you that are unaware of what your elected county school superintendent office is in charge of and not in charge of, where our authority lies. We're open 365 days a year. It's 8 to 5. We're downtown, the corner of Stone and Alameda. Doors always open. We are all in person here. We have some pillars that we really work in, like 3 big pillars. The first one is all based on admin and finance. And basically what that means is all the dollars that come through to education in Pima County, whether it be from state assistance, from the taxes you pay if you own a home, grants, federal dollars that come in, Proposition 123, Governor's 2020, 1 cent sales tax, all of that money flows through here. And we are kind of the accountant, as you would call it, for most of the districts here in Pima County. That's $1.5 billion per year that generates and comes through the office and is dispersed out. Now, authority-wise, absolutely zero authority. So whatever a school wants to spend that, and that's 100% district schools when it comes to the funding. That money goes directly to those schools. We either work with them monthly on their balances or we give them their lump sum in parts approximately a couple times a year. The other part we do in our administration part is we are an election office. So just like you have the county recorder that does the elections for all the candidates, like myself, when we're running to be reelected, we run all the elections for the governing board members. And we run all the elections for the school district bonds and overrides. And so every year we go through that scenario with all the schools. It is an extremely detailed oriented part of this office. And our office kind of runs like a regular row office, like your county recorder, or your assessor, or your treasurer. That's really the role that we play in the community as far as kind of overseeing those operations. The governing board members, interestingly, are only every even year do they go on your actual ballots. So on odd years, there's no election for them. So if something comes up in between now and then, at any time, even on an even year, you may have a governing board member leave for whatever reason, creating a vacancy in the seat. Your elected county school superintendent, me here in Pima County, is the only authority for appointing a governing board member to a board. So that would be on a non-election year. And we do that through a committee here in the office, or we work directly with the school and form committees for the community. And we basically kind of just take a temperature of that community and figure out what's the best strategy that's going to work to put someone really great in that office. Number one, that's going to care about kids. Number two, going to care about teachers. And number three, their whole general community in there. We really try to stay as neutral political as possible when approving another governing board member. And that's tough. That's really tough to do, especially in the fever and the direction that governing board members and education has become such a large platform for candidates going forward, not just as governing board members, as you all know, but for any type of political candidate going forward, is really putting education on their agenda as their bully pulpits. One other thing in our administration piece is if you own that house and you see your tax bill, you're going to have what's called a qualifying tax rate. And that rate is developed here in conjunction with the school in Pima County, and it's all based on assessed value. We put those in a formula-driven sort of scenario, and out comes that number. So if you like your tax bill and your qualifying tax rate, and you've seen some improvements there, and you like how it's gotten a little lower, that's me. If it goes higher and you don't like it, then you go to Chuck Huckleberry and Jan Lesher. That's what I always tell everyone. Just joking. It is what it is. You put the numbers in, and out comes your qualifying tax rate. It is a major, major process. And by state law, you only have about 3 weeks to compile all this information with the schools, the treasurer, county school superintendent's office. It's a major ordeal, especially because you're dealing with people's money and their property taxes. And that's that admin piece. And it just runs all day long. The next big pillar that we do here is we're a professional development provider. So schools, and this can be any school now. So this can be a district school, this can be a charter school, private school, and our homeschool community. We provide what's called professional development, which is teaching of the teacher or teaching for whatever area they need in that school. They would call us and, for instance, say, well, we want to work on new science and technology engineering standards and math, STEM field. We have a flagship program called STEMazing. It's just one of our programs here that we would have them interact with that director. They make a small strategic vision on what is the best way to execute and plan for that community, because every school is so unique and so different that you really have to finite your lesson plan or your program for what that school wants, their particular needs. Another program that I'll mention might be a new program we've launched in the last 2 years called Advance. It's all based on special education, student with special needs. We saw at the umbrella level, as our office likes to look at things, where were some areas that we had some big concerns, and this office didn't have a special education department that just focused solely on those kids. And those kids could be anything. They have what are called individual education plans. They have what are called 504 plans, any need gifted programs in there, anything that they need, again, working one-on-one. What was neat about this program is we have seen that there has been,
go sit down.
There has been a difference in special education services at the district school level compared to special education services at the charter school level and then at private school. Private school is much more difficult to watch just because it's closed. We don't get to see too much of what's going on. Charter is a little bit better, but district school is just right in front of your face. It's been there for years, and they must have these things in place. So we are seeing a lot of charter schools that are starting to enter that arena with wanting to provide better services for their students. So we're happy about that. We still see that the percentage that districts are seeing in special education students compared to the percentage of charter school students, there's a big disparity still, probably approximately 8 to 12% you're seeing. Some districts now are creeping up to 18, close to 20% with a SPED population in their districts compared to charter schools that might not have any. And so what happens is that sometimes diverts students. Some students won't go and get the services they need, or they won't be able to have it provided at charter schools or private schools. So then they have to come over to the district school. That's okay. Districts can handle that as long as the funding is going to be there to support the teachers. Special needs students need a little bit more attention, parapros, different resources in there to make sure that student has the absolute same equity and equal balance of getting the best education possible. So we pride ourselves on our programs. I put in the chat schools.pima.gov, put that on your favorite list, like us on Facebook and all of that. But on there are our programs, and you can see all the programs. If you ever think or anybody wants to come and watch one or be a part of it or know anybody that would like to get involved, that would be the first line of how to get involved for our program directors. Also, in that election piece, we go back to the admin when we talk about the governing board candidates. All that information on our website is there as far as who's running for what. You can see how many people are running for TUSD, Vail, Sarita, any of the districts. You can see those names right now. All the forms are there. If you ever wanted a special presentation on governing board members getting actively involved, that would be something else, Larry, to reach out. We could schedule something up. You've got about right now, this year, you've got approximately, I believe, 45 candidates running across Pima County for different individual districts. And then we're going to have about approximately 5 districts go out for bonds and overrides. So behind the scenes, getting involved in supporting our schools in those bonds and overrides is really, really important. And I don't know if you guys ever do take positions on debates for certain school district areas, but that's one area that our office, again, has to take that neutrality part, being that we're the elected certification office. So we can't get into debates or any endorsements. So it's really good when we see a League of Women Voters sometimes puts on some debates, but listening to the views of governing board members and finding out the direction for what they want to have happen. Our office has no authority on the school. The school's full authority is all given to those elected governing board members. So when we look at the bills that come through, this is a big, big trend, is those bills get implemented at the state. They come through, and those governing board members are the ones that have to make that happen. And so it's very important understanding what the direction of your district school and your community wants to go. You can see that these relationships going forward in the political arena and how the vision of a school wants to do their teaching for kids, it's all based on those elected governing board members and that superintendent. So super, super important that when you're advocating for education, and I know you guys are because I see you from afar all the time, and you have good lists and there's lots of bills to talk about. We'll get on that one more second. Inviting those governing board members is a big power play for the way politics are played in schools. Last big pillar that we do here is we do have one school that is ours. And we do have full control of that school with the finance, and we also have full control of that school of the authority and the operations. That school is called the Accommodation School District, and it's located in the Juvenile Detention Center and the Adult Jail. So I have 2 locations. If you're a juvenile under the ages of 18, you're either going to be tried and sent to the Juvenile Detention Center, which is by Keno Sports Park on Ajo, or you're going to be sent over towards the actual jail, and you would be in a juvenile pod. And for students that are between the ages of 14 and 18, they will live over in the jail if they're tried as an adult. And we have right now across the county, you've got approximately 75 students total. That number fluctuates. And those are our babies. So we take care of them just like we would do any other school. We try to give them every opportunity that we possibly can. We have principals, special education directors, math teachers, and English teachers, and history teachers. And it's a whole production that lives over at the Juvenile Detention Center and the adult jail. Most schools are 180-day school. This school is a 200-day school, and it's called the Accommodation District. Very, very interesting, the politics there. When we talk about incarceration funding, when we talk about opportunity youth, when we talked about school prison pipeline, this is a really good place to start your conversations. So if you ever want me invited or at a table to talk about what is happening at the juvenile level, where it really all begins, I tell a lot of other groups that I meet with, recidivism doesn't start in the prisons, or it starts in these juvenile detention centers, and you can start to see these common trends, and it's all really based on home life and poverty and color, and so there's a lot of things, and we spend a lot of time working with where our authority is on that.
Thanks so much for your dedicated public service, Dustin. We appreciate it.
Thank all of you for what you're doing. It's really important. Thanks, guys.